What's up guys, Zephyr here, and welcome to my patch 12.5 rundown. This is going to be a super big patch. It's also going to be a month-long patch, as they talk about in the patch notes. So I think this is going to shake up the meta a lot with all the things they're changing, and also it's going to be the meta for an entire month, you know, barring a B patch. But still, it's going to be a super long patch, going to be super important if you want to climb a lot. So let's jump right into it. So large changes. The first one is to Tome of Traits. They are nerfing the tailored emblems a little bit. So you basically have to have more active traits to have the same number of tailored emblems in as used to be the case with Tome of Traits. I think this is a fine change. I think if you look at actually Augment Stats, this is something that I wanted to bring up. So I'm on tactics.tools, their website. They have a ton of really good Augment Stats. If you look actually at, it's called Ancient Archives, the augment for that gives you a Tome of Traits actually didn't perform that well. If you look, its average placement is pretty high compared to a lot of other stuff. It's, you know, it's about the middle. But in actuality, this augment isn't that OP, even as like a first augment. I think it's decently strong if you can high roll innovators, but outside of that, it's like just okay. And I think a lot of people are sort of tunnel visioning on this. I mean, there is a factor to consider where a lot of people who pick this augment may not be doing everything they can to get themselves an innovator emblem. So what you can do is you can put in Yordle, Twin Shot, Enchanter, and that will increase your number of active traits. But there's no Yordle, Twin Shot, or Enchanter emblem that you can get. So that's a way to sort of cheat the system. So maybe people aren't taking advantage of that as much, and that's what makes the win rate not as high as you'd think, the placement. But like in actuality, something like just taking a so small, even a sniper's nest is way better. Like calculated loss, even as your first augment, would be way better, or double trouble, just statistically. But it might be that this is too hard to play, and that's why they had to nerf it. So we'll see. I don't feel like this is super needed, but if in the data they think so, then that's okay. Next up is augments, just some general augment balance stuff. I think generally most of these are fine. I haven't looked at the data on all of these, and I don't want to go through infinite data, so I'm not going to pull up the data on everything, but the gist of it is that Battle Mage is nerfed. Chemtech Unity is going from silver to gold. I think this is absolutely necessary based on how strong the Renata Bruisers comp has been. You just take Chemtech Unity, play 3 Chemtechs, all your Bruisers get Chemtech, and it's kind of insane. Concussive Blows as well, I think, has been pretty strong here. Also a Concussive Blows buff, right? Nerfing the cooldown, a shorter cooldown. Cybernetic Implants 3 nerf, which is interesting. I'm kind of curious just to check the placement of Cybernetic 3 right now. Okay, yeah, it's quite high, so that actually makes a lot of sense. And yeah, just FYI, you can go through this site, look at any of the win rates of these augments, as well as what the average placement is based on the pick. So like first pick, some things are stronger, right? Double Trouble is the best first pick prismatic in the game, according to this. So really interesting site, tactics.tools/augments. But back into the actual changes. Cybernetic Implants nerf, I guess makes sense. Disintegrator nerfed slightly at 1 and 2, seems fine. Double Trouble nerfs, as we were just looking at. Double Trouble's like actually really strong. You just have to play the right comp for it. There are some comps that work really well. Like if you're in a very tight comp, like a reroll comp, I feel like, you know, if you're playing Twitch reroll, it's kind of tough. You would love to have like 2 Twitches in and get the bonus onto your 3-star Twitch, but in reality, I think it's best to just play with something that has a shell that you can fit a lot of champions into. So like an Innovators comp plus like 2 Irelias, or just put in like 2 Seraphines. I really think like a Renata comp with like 2 Vys and 2 Renatas is like kind of insane, and then you just drop down to 4 Bruisers. So I think Double Trouble was actually quite strong. Should be a little bit more balanced here, but still pretty good. Electro Charge, damage being nerfed seems fine. Or Score being buffed I think is good. This augment felt kind of useless. The Future Sight 2 Golden Egg Radiant Relics option, which is Radiant Zephyr, is getting nerfed. I think that makes absolute sense. Future Sight 2, if we want to look back at this, is one of the best prismatics in the game. I mean, the thing is, like, being able to see your next opponent is really good. Getting the Radiant Zephyr is insane. This item is so good. And being able to Radiant Zephyr their carry almost every fight, unless they're, like, really, they're sweating their positioning and swapping a lot at the last second, is kind of nuts. So I think it makes a lot of sense to nerf Radiant Zephyr. Sunlight Cape is also being nerfed, which you can also go to Meta TFT if you want another stats bent for figuring out what the best augments and items are here. Sunlight Cape is one of the best Radiant items here as well. And I believe they also nerf Covalent Spark. So they're nerfing a lot of the really OP Radiant items. Though interesting that Banshee Silence and Rascal's Gloves were untouched and Locket of Targon Prime, because those, just statistically based on the information that I have on Meta TFT, are the best ones. So yeah, that's nerfed. Luden's Echo spell damage is nerfed. I heard a lot of people talk about how just OP this augment is if you have units that are just casting infinitely. You don't have to put it on just an AP composition. You know, like someone like an Ezreal is going to proc Luden's Echo a lot. So I think it makes sense to nerf this. There's a new augment called High 5, which is a prismatic augment that gives 5 random 5 costs. I think this is really interesting. I think it'll lead to some really cool and like hype high roll moments where you're just playing the game and you pick this and suddenly you have a 2-star 5 cost. So I'm pretty down for this. It seems quite fun, and I mean, there's definitely going to be times where you want this. It can only appear as the third augment, of course. There's no shot that they would allow you to get high 5 during stage 2. Portable Forge, they are buffing Zhonya's Paradox in multiple ways. So speaking of like strong items, weak items, according to the stats that I'm looking at, this wasn't even the weakest item that you could take off Portable Forge. It's actually like one of the better ones, but you know, Riot Games probably has better data, so maybe there's something incorrect about this data, but looking at this, it looks like Gold Collector is the worst. Eternal Winter isn't even that good, and that Zhonya's Paradox is actually quite good. So it's interesting. So I'm not sure. Second Wind 3 has been removed. I think that's fine. These type of augments that give you just bonuses, like these type of augments, like, and I'm sorry, I have a auto card anywhere to pull up Magic the Gathering cards. Augments like this that like restore HP. Something like a Celestial Blessing is really strong. I just think restoring 100% of your missing HP, like how much better is that than Second Wind 2 or even Second Wind 1 in a lot of scenarios. So I think that makes a lot of sense. They took that out. Triforce nerfed. This augment was pretty insane if you could end up in a situation where you could take it, especially with the prevalence of 3-cross reroll in the meta right now, where Senna's really strong. Rerolling for Senna, Morgana is really strong. You can also reroll for Tryndamere, and it's really strong. You can even reroll for like Lucian and GP, as you saw in one of my videos that I posted this week, so I think it makes sense to nerf this. This is actually a really interesting change. Triforce can now only be offered if you have 2 or more 3-cost units in play. They're doing a lot of these things to make your augments more tailored so it feels like you don't ever get offered super dead augments. What this means is that going into the second and third augment choices, you really need to be tailoring your team comps to what augment you want to get. So if you really want to get Triforce and you just have a Tryndamere in, you don't have any other 3-cost in, you better put another 3-cost in to increase the chance of you getting Triforce. It's kind of interesting. It allows for some more like really skill-based play, but it's also like a ton of knowledge to have in your head to say, okay, I need to put in these units for Triforce, and then I need to have at least 2 Chemtech in so I can get like potentially a Chemtech emblem. It's kind of difficult, but that's definitely something to think about with this change and some of the other changes that are coming out, where you really need to be tailoring your comp to what you want your late game comp to be early. That doesn't mean that you necessarily have to do that and that you can't pivot at all, but you're going to be in a really good spot if you tailor your comp early and get a really strong augment. And then last big augment change is Woodland Trinket. The clone health has gone up. I think that makes a lot of sense. I think this augment, in my experience, has been absolute garbage. We can check the placement of it real quick. But yeah, it's just terrible. I've never seen this augment perform well. And 4 score also down here, so showing you that they're buffing up some of the worst augments. So yeah, that is all of the big augments changes. Now it changes to traits. So Bodyguard buff, they're buffing the shield. I think this makes perfect sense. It was just seeing not as much play as Bruiser because of the fact that Bruisers have Vi plus Sejuani. Just the default frontline is, okay, Vi plus Sejuani, you get Bruisers, you get Enforcer, and it's like way too good. So it makes sense to buff up Bodyguard so that they're a little bit more attractive as a frontline. And they're also buffing the shield instead of the actual armor, which allows you to play Bodyguards in more spots as opposed to just like a counter for a comp that's all AD. So that's really cool. Enchanters also aren't being played as much, especially with the removal of Janna. I just feel like it's a lot harder to slot in Enchanters into a lot of comps before you would just throw in a Janna so that you can get your Scholar, and then, okay, it makes sense. I'll throw in Orianna. I'll throw in, you know, maybe a Lulu, a Taric. Right now, Senna is the same spot as Taric, so Senna makes you kind of want to play Enchanters, but yeah, you're really not seeing that many Enchanters. So a double buff to Enchanters I think is good. Might make Enchanters really strong, right? Because Senna's already really good. I feel like there may be some kind of Senna plus Morgana plus Orianna comp that is like quite strong with these buffs, but we'll see. Enforcer nerf, like I said, Enforcer is just kind of free right now, so it makes sense to nerf it. Hextech Shield getting buffed, I think, makes a lot of sense, and it's being buffed at 2, 4, and 6, and then it's the same at 8 Hextech. I think that makes perfect sense. Hextech is in the garbage can right now after the big nerfs to it last patch, which made a lot of sense. In the B patch, I mean. It made a lot of sense, right, because Hextech was way too good, but I feel like it's kind of been in the dumpster recently, so I think these buffs make sense. So the Hexagon Dragon is being adjusted, so it doesn't grant you 75% crit chance anymore. Instead, it just makes it so that you will always crit strike if able. So the reasoning that they gave for this is that the Dragon used to be really OP in combination with Infinity Edge. If you built Infinity Edge and you had the Hextech Dragon, it was insane. But outside of that, it was a bit weaker. So they're trying to sort of like flatten out the power of Hextech Dragon by making it good without Infinity Edge, but not as good with Infinity Edge. So I think this is a good change. The crit strike damage is increased from 10 to 25%, and the lightning damage is increased from 500 to 600. This is scary to me because these are just straight up buffs, right? And Innovators are also already like the strongest comp right now. If you go to Meta TFT, you look at the strongest comp. I mean, I'm sorting by master tier. I mean, it's Renata and it's Innovators, and then you have another Innovator comp. Like, and then you have, you know, Innovators Twitch reroll. Like, Innovators are dominating the meta right now, and there's some nerfs to Innovators in the patch, I'm pretty sure, but it's a little scary to buff the Dragon. That just seems like it's going to make 7 Innovator already. Like, it's already a high roll that guarantees you very likely top 4, often top 2. Now it's going to be even better than that, so it's kind of scary. All right, unit changes. A lot of cool stuff here, so let's get into it. Brand buffs. So they are buffing the damage on his Seer. And I believe this, as they were saying in the patch preview, the Seer damage is the damage on the second hit visibility. So you're rewarded for casting more, which I think is totally fine. I think Brand is not that strong of a unit right now. I remember when I played on PB, I played a Brand reroll game and it felt good, and it's not actually been like a real comp on live. So I would love to see Brand reroll blue buff be a thing. So hopefully this makes it a little bit better, or also just be able to play Brand as like a strong opener into AP, play Brand, slam a blue buff, eventually pivot into like Renata or Malzahar. I think would be really cool, but I just don't do it that much right now because I feel like Brand's not as strong. Jarvan nerfs, so they're nerfing his attack speed and they're nerfing his starting mana. There's another nerf to Hextech, which I feel like Jarvan inherently is a really strong unit, right? Because he can buff your entire team's attack speed by a ton. But like the only comp that really wants to play him is Hextech, like maybe a Striker's comp with Irelia, but I don't know with Hextech being in the state they are now that Jarvan nerfs actually make that much sense, but maybe they feel like they might accidentally make Hextech too OP if these supporting units like Jarvan are really strong. Nocturne, I'm sorry, give me one sec. It's not an okay. I don't know why it's popping up these. I apologize. Okay, so Nocturne, the stun duration at 3-star is going down, and the damage is going down at all levels. I mean, Nocturne is a very strong early game unit, a great item holder if you're going to play something like a Renata. He really item holds Morello's Hextech Gunblade really well. So I think it makes sense to nerf him, just thinking in terms of like item holders. Like I was definitely item holding Nocturne more than I was item holding Brand, so that makes sense. And I mean, they're buffing it in this area where it now correctly scales with AP, but I mean, a decent amount of time you are building AP on Nocturne, so maybe overall, like if you're going to play this unit early, I think just slamming like a Morello's on him or Hextech Gunblade is totally fine. and then you just pivot into something else late game. So I don't have much of an opinion on this, to be honest. But I mean, it's another potential nerf if you don't build items on him to just Hex Tech. This is also like a nerf to potentially like a reroll comp where you reroll for Nocturne. So that's something to think about. But I don't think there's a very strong Nocturne reroll comp right now. Like theoretically, you could reroll for it in Debonair, but I don't know how often you actually do that. And Twitch nerfs. I think this is absolutely needed. So the Bolt attack damage scaling percent is going down at 3-star and 2-star. And the base damage is going down at 3-star. I think this is absolutely needed. And it's going up at 1-star, which it makes sense. Just flatten Twitch out a little bit. This rat is way too strong with how strong this reroll comp is. Though, as you can see here, it's gone down in recent days, but I think this comp can definitely still be very strong. So I think it makes sense to nerf it. All right, on to 2 cost. So Ashe is being buffed. I think this is a really good buff. So speaking of reroll comps, something like an Ashe reroll, I think is like potentially playable, but just not completely meta yet. This is what the comp would look like if you were to play Ashe reroll, and you just roll for Ashe, Zyra, Morgana, potentially Darius if you hit a bunch. So I think this comp seems really interesting. I haven't actually got a chance to play it myself, but I think if you start a Syndicate Augment, you can actually play this Ashe reroll comp right now, and it's pretty decent. So I think with the Ashe buffs, it might actually be like a real comp that you can go for a lot of the time. So I'm excited for that. I think it'll be a really interesting comp. And then also, just in general, having Ashe being a strong unit is good. I think the volley range being buffed by Hex is really big, because I think one thing that a lot of people complain about with Ashe is that her volley just wasn't doing enough, wasn't hitting enough units. Okay, now they're changing Rek'Sai completely, which I think is interesting. They've reworked her spell. So the damage no longer scales with AP. They've buffed her armor and armor. They have removed the resist steal, and the heal, now with no AP scaling, is going to be a little bit lower, but with an AP scaling. And now, if Rek'Sai's already bitten her target, she heals extra HP. So it's this idea of building like a super tank Rek'Sai, maybe with some AP, and just having her go infinite. I think it's pretty interesting. I haven't really played much Rek'Sai reroll, so I don't know how strong it was right now, but I think theoretically just having like a super tank Rek'Sai like this is interesting. It's a cool identity for Rek'Sai, which like right now her identity, it's still pretty interesting. So I'm honestly, I don't have a lot of opinions on this because I haven't played Rek'Sai that much, just outside of being a trade bot and bruisers, but I think this definitely seems interesting. I'm excited to try Rek'Sai out with this. Okay. The recost change, a lot of big stuff here, because three costs, in my opinion, are incredibly strong in the meta right now. Okay, so Echo nerfs absolutely needed. This unit is insane. Just Assassin Scrap Innovator, it's too good. It's too good, especially when you're playing a comp like this Innovator reroll comp where you're making use of the Assassin, the Scrap, and the Innovator. It's just too good. So I think this absolutely makes sense as a nerf. Gnar is being buffed. The range of the Mega Gnar's boulder is being buffed, so maybe you'll hit like one more unit. It's pretty cool. I think there's a lot of actual buffs to Yordles in this patch, which is a little bit scary because I think Yordles are already fine if you get them in a good spot, so I feel like now they're going to be even better, but we'll see. The damage for Lucian's ability is being buffed at all levels. I think this is also something that's a bit scary, especially they're buffing his HP and they're buffing his MR. Lucian reroll, Lucian Gangplank reroll was also already kind of a thing. As you can see, it's not super meta right now, but they're buffing Lucian, they're buffing Corki, and they're buffing Twin Shot. It's a little scary. I wonder if this reroll comp's like actually gonna be real. It's very fun to play, so if you get the spot where you can play it, I would absolutely play this reroll comp. But yeah, it's something to think about. It's definitely interesting. So other 3 costs, we have Malzahar Nerfs. I think absolutely needed. This unit was just too broken. Like, you just take a Malzahar, put your items for Renata Glask on him, and then he's just going to carry you to the end of the game. Like, it's simply too good. So nerfing him at 1, 2, and 3 stars, I think makes a ton of sense. It's not a huge nerf. It's just a little bit of a damage nerf. So, 25 damage at 1 star, 50 damage at 2 star. He's still going to be a great unit. He's just not going to be as ridiculous as he was before. And thank God there's some Senna nerfs. This unit is just too good, I think. So they're nerfing her AD scaling, and they're nerfing the damage of it at just 2 and 3 star. So I think that's absolutely needed. I think this unit's too good. So yeah, really good change, just flatten things out in general. But importantly, I'm a little scared of these Lucian buffs. I mean, Hextech isn't very strong right now, so I feel like you don't play him in the Hextech vertical, but you just play him in the Twin Shot vertical with a more reroll bent. Ideally, finding something like a Three's Company, or Triforce is what it's called. And you just play Lucian, Gangplank, Morgana, Leona, Senna, and like your comp's looking kind of nuts. I mean, at least they nerfed Senna in that comp, but still, I think this comp might actually be quite strong next patch. Okay, so tier 4 units. They're buffing Ahri's starting mana, and the angle between each orb is going down, so it's going to be less wide, right? So before it's something like this, and there's like multiple orbs here, they're making that angle smaller, so ideally it's going to hit more. The orbs aren't going to miss units. You're not going to see a unit just getting field goaled by 2 Ahri orbs. So I think that makes a lot of sense. I think Ahri's in a really weak spot right now, so these buffs are good. I don't even know if this is enough, honestly. Like, I wouldn't be completely grossed out if they buffed Ahri's damage, but maybe the data doesn't hold that in. I just feel like Ahri is in a very weak spot right now, so I feel like you could buff her even more. But, you know, who's to say? The Alistar Pulverized damage is going down, so this is to stop people from playing the Mad Cow Alistar carry style, where some people just throw AP items on like a Socialite Alistar and have him go off. It is a pretty rare build, but I understand that Riot Games doesn't want any colossal units to ever really be viable carries, because if they are, then it's the unCCable carry, which is pretty gross. So that makes sense, even though it's sad, because these types of units are always fun to see, you know, like a Clapio build or a crit Scion last set. So a bit sad to see, but completely understandable. Brahms stun duration has been buffed pretty sizably at 1 and 2 star, right? A quarter of a second at 1 star and half a second at 2 star. I think it's pretty sizable. Along with the other buffs to Bodyguard already, I think make a lot of sense. And like actually maybe Bodyguards are a solid frontline. So especially like I was talking about, this build already plays Bodyguards as their frontline. You play them with the buffs to Bodyguards and the buff to Braum. I'm telling you, sleeper OP. I mean, we'll see if it's actually good in the win rate, but I think this comp could be really good next patch. And it was also just, it's been fun the times I've played it. So yeah, it's interesting. Draven, so they're trying to flatten out. Once again, they're doing a lot of flattening this patch, trying to get you know, more towards a consistent use case where instead of a unit being like either garbage or OP, it's just like decent, which I think is quite fair. So they're giving Draven just straight up armor penetration. The bonus armor penetration on VIP is going down to 25%, so at VIP it's the same amount of armor penetration. Draven's range is going up to 4. The AD scaling on his axes is actually going up, and the base damage on his axes is going down. Okay. So, better scaling, worse base damage, more range if you don't have him VIP'd, more armor pen if you have VIP'd, if you don't have him VIP'd. The idea is just being able to play non-VIP Draven, which makes a lot of sense, right? Like, it feels really bad if you're just playing Draven that's not VIP. So, I think this is totally fine, makes a lot of sense, and hopefully it'll make VIP vertical more playable. I've heard a lot of people are playing Draven. I haven't really gotten to work that much myself, and just looking in the win rates, like, okay, where's Draven? If I control F for Draven, what's the first Draven comp that comes up? This like 4 Clockwork 3 Debonair variant with like an okay win rate, you know? But like if you look for something else, like this variant where you're playing Syndicates, or even like a 6 Challenger variant, the win rate is garbage. So maybe something like this is how you're supposed to play Draven. This like secret 4 Clockwork variant that I don't see like anyone playing is the best way to play Draven, and maybe he's quite good, but in my experience he's not that crazy. So I think these changes are fine, especially because it makes it so that you don't have to high roll the Debonair VIP to be able to play him. Renata nerfs, absolutely needed. Feels bad because I love playing Renata. The comp is just so fun, but I think it absolutely makes sense. You have to nerf her. Zephyr attack speed being buffed, less like this unit I feel like is so bad unless you get like 8 hex tech, and then it's like easy top 2, probably top 3. But speaking of like flattening out the use case, like just a regular Sivir where you're playing 4 Hex Tech or 6 Hex Tech, I think, yeah, buff is definitely needed. And then last 4 cost change is Vi nerfs. So the damage of our Pulverize is going down, and the third cast damage is also going down. I think it makes perfect sense. This unit's simply too good, especially talking more about trying to push people into playing more bodyguards instead of bruisers because bruisers are too OP. I think a Vi nerf makes a ton of sense. Okay. Next to 5 costs. So Galio is getting more max health scaling on his Colossal Entrance. I think very slight Galio buff, which I think is good because once again, if you go look at stats for units, he is the worst 5 costs by a decent margin. So I think it definitely makes sense to buff him. Kaisa attack speed, and if you're looking here again, she's the second worst 5 cost, so I think it makes sense to buff her. Tahm Kench, increasing the Devour damage on crowd control immune targets. Also, you look again, he is also pretty low compared to the top 4, Victor, Silco, Jason, Jinx. I'm not counting Veigar. I think it makes sense, and a Zeri buff as well. So if you're just looking, it's the 4th lowest win rate 5 cost that they're buffing. I think it makes perfect sense. I really don't have anything else to say to this. Okay. Items. So Bramble Vest is being changed a little bit. It's going to be doing more damage on Reflect, but the bonus damage reduction is going down. So it's not as hard of a counter to something like Assassins or people who are just building crit. I think it's fine. It's still quite a hard counter. It just makes it so like sometimes Assassin players can win. So I think that's reasonable. We'll see, because like extra Reflect damage is fine, but like you're losing tankiness on this item, right? And just trading it for damage, which is a bit weird. So we'll see what happens. I guess if you kill the unit that's hitting you, then you're doing, you know, you'll be more tanky if you kill a unit, right? Because then you're taking less damage. But yeah, I don't know about this. Seems like an overall nerf to me, but I think it's reasonable. I mean, Bramble Vest is often a slam, so I think it makes sense. Okay, so small changes. Okay, I'm not going to read the part in quotes because it's already confusing me. So here's more of the things that I'm talking about where they are making it so you can only get augments in specific spots, right? Battle Mage you can't get if you're playing 2+ snipers. I think makes perfect sense. Dominance can only appear now if you are in a 2 winning streak. I think makes sense because before I feel like, I mean, how many people are taking Dominance at 3-3 when on a loss streak? Like no one. So I think it's nice to just take that out. Or after just winning 1 combat, I think like no one. So I think it totally makes sense. Covalent Spark nerfs, Brink of Dawn nerfs Covalent Spark nerfs, Brink of Dawn buff. So I think this makes sense. Like I was showing up earlier, Covalent Spark was one of the best items. So I think it makes sense to nerf it. Radiant Edge of Night, I think. And I'm not going to go through every item, but I imagine it was 2 weeks, so I think that's fine. Golden Gifts can only appear as the second augment? That's interesting. For some reason, I thought they said in the patch notes that it could no longer. Okay, interesting. So Treasure Trove 1 and 2 can only appear as the first augment. Golden Gifts can only appear as the second. It's very odd to me. Not sure why that is. Because I mean, it's the same idea as Treasure Trove, right? You're just getting orbs. That's very strange to me. I don't know why this is. Knife's Edge, you can't get if you're playing 2 Arcanists, 2 Scholars, 2 Snipers, or 2 Enchanters. Makes perfect sense, really. Well, I guess you could theoretically play an Enchanter's comp that plays AD carries. But this is what I'm talking about. If you're going into 3-3, and you absolutely don't want to get Knife's Edge, like make sure, I mean, you'll always be playing the 2 Arcanists, but if you just don't want to get this, you can just tech in 2 Scholars. Or, you know, if you're only playing the 1 Sniper, but you know you're going to play Snipers late game because you pyroed like a Jin 2 somehow, you really want to tech in the 2 Snipers so that you don't get Knife's Edge, so that you don't get Battle Mage. So these are things to think about for 3-3 and for 4-6. Portable Forge is the Collector is being buffed. I think that makes sense. Like I was showing, Collector is one of the worst items in the game. Swift Justice has been renamed to True Justice. Okay, and then Treasure Trove 1 and 2 only appearing as first augment makes a lot of sense, I think. Because Econ augments are best when taken first because the Econ is going to compound across the rest of the game. if you take them as second or third, it's not as good. So, yeah. Okay, here are the twin shot buffs I was talking about. Very slight buffs. An extra 5 AD at 2, 3, 4, and then an extra 20 at 5. So that's a heck of a chase trait. So it's interesting. I really feel like this isn't needed. Like I don't know. I kept pointing at it, but I feel like this twin shot comp might actually be good. I hope it is. I think this comp is really fun to watch. Just farm infinite gold with Gangplank or watch Lucian dash around and shoot a bunch, and just Corki's a really fun unit. So hopefully it's good, but it's a little scary. Ezreal being nerfed, perfect. I think makes a ton of sense because of how strong innovators are. Like I honestly, they could have nerfed Ezreal and Singed, in my opinion. I feel like innovators are still gonna be really strong. The Corki buffs also I think are kind of nuts. Like I feel like I play this unit and he already does so much damage. Like, do you really need to buff Corki's damage even more? And then also a Lulu buff? Like, I'm going Yordles 20 out of 20 when the new patch comes out. Not actually, but like, if you did that, I mean, the only issue is like other people are going to be doing that. Like, I feel like if you get a good spot for Yordles, you will place highly. I feel like you will place highly. We were looking at Augment Stats, right? Already the best Augment in the entire game, if you're a silver Augment, is so small. And it's taken a decent amount of the time. Like, this win rate is going to go up, right? Because they're just straight up buffing all the Yordles. There's not a single buff to the Yordle comp. So if you see so small as your first Augment, like, you better snap take this. This is the best first pick silver tier Augment in the entire game. You should be taking so small every time and just playing Yordles. It's, like, actually nuts, and it's going to be even more nuts in the new patch. Okay. Morgana Nerfs, I think, make perfect sense. This unit is too good, especially at 3-star. Trinamir Nerfs, biggest at 3-star, I think also make a ton of sense. This unit is kind of really good if you can 3-star him. So yeah, makes a lot of sense. I'm happy to see both of these nerfed. And it also makes it so 3-cost reroll meta isn't as big, so maybe there's more room for like 4 costs. Okay. Into 4 costs, Aurelia's AD is being nerfed very slightly. I think Aurelia's in a fine spot right now. I don't think this nerf is necessary, but okay. The AD scaling on Jin's ult is being buffed at just 1 star. I think that's fine. Yeah, not much to write home about. Will make the comp a little bit better at 1 star, but it's very minuscule. But I think it's totally fine because Jin is pretty weak right now. I honestly would think about buffing it at 2 star as well, but maybe with all the changes, Jin becomes more playable then. We'll see. And Kha'Zix's ability has been renamed. Okay, whatever. Units at tier 5, Jinx buffs? So we were looking at these, right? We were looking at units. Where was Jinx actually? She was one of the best ones, right? She's 3rd best 5 cost. I feel like she doesn't need a buff, but okay. That's fine, I guess. I mean, it's very small. Edge of Night is being buffed slightly, and Static Shiv is being nerfed. I mean, Static Shiv is like one of the best slams in the game, so I think that's fine. I honestly wasn't slamming it that much this patch, so it doesn't really affect me. I feel like because the Renata comp doesn't really need Shiv. Like, I guess if you're playing Hex Tech, it's a really good slam. So I guess that's the spot where you slam Static Shiv, but it doesn't seem as flexible as it used to be, just because like a lot of these really good comps like don't really care that much for a Static Shiv. Like Renata likes a Static Shiv, but like, you know, it's good on a Seraphine, so I guess it's fine in Innovator. I guess it's fine here. If you're playing like Jhin, I guess you can put it on Seraphine. Okay, it's a fine. I mean, you're never playing it here. You don't really want it all in Irelia. You don't really want it all in Irelia. You don't really want it all in this comp, so it's an okay item. Probably still fine, but definitely not as strong as like last set where I feel like you just slam this item every game. But yeah, the Edge of Knife buff I think is fine. And yeah, that is it. There's some bug changes. I think the biggest one is that Innovator Shoal would never show up. This makes a lot of sense because I've not seen Innovator Soul at all recently, but like that's also a big buff to innovators, right? Like, you're telling me that the best comps in the game are innovator based in a situation where you can't even get one of the best augments in the game? What? Like, that's so insane. So I don't know. Coming out of these patch notes, I think they hit a lot of really good stuff, but I am quite afraid. I think Renata will get slightly worse with a lot of the changes, like the nerfs to Renata and to Vi, potential changes to Rek'Sai. We'll see if it's good or bad. So I think Renata's going to get slightly worse, so that's good. I think this comp is still way too good. I'm a little bit afraid that Innovators are still going to be strong. All they've really nerfed here is Ezreal and Senna and Echo a little bit. Vi being nerfed in this variant of the comp, but I feel like Innovators are still going to be really strong. They did not touch this comp at all. Like tiny nerfs to Nocturne, tiny nerfs to Echo, but I would still, if you're a big Debonair Assassin player, a Talon reroll player, then I would still absolutely play this. So yeah, those are some of the changes to the top comps. As far as new comps that may rise up, I think Yordles are going to get really good this patch. I think Twin Shot is going to get a lot better this patch. You know, I don't know if you're going to play Yordles and Twin Shot every game, but I think if you end up in a spot to play these, you absolutely should. And yeah, those are the biggest ones that I can immediately think of. Hextech should also get a little bit better, so that'll be cool. Maybe Silver will be a bit more playable because, ugh, 6 Hextech, 4 Striker at almost a 6 average placement is insane. Okay, so that's my rundown. Sorry for it being so long. You know what? I won't apologize. This is A tier content. So yeah, if you like this video, please like, comment, and subscribe, and check out my Twitch, Discord, and my Twitter down below. Thank you for watching.